Hello, hello, and welcome to Millennial Notebook. My name is Stella,
And my name is Emily.
and here we talk about living life as a millennial in the modern age.
Get comfy, grab your notebook, and let's enjoy the ride together.
Episode 2, welcome! Hi, Emily, how have you been?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm very excited because we are talking about one of my favorite topics. I bring it up in almost every single conversation with every new person that I meet. I'd always end up opening with a line, "Hey, are you an extrovert and introvert?" And that's where it starts. Yeah, and so I'm very excited, and we are gonna be focusing about the topic of meeting people as an introvert, as Emily and I identify as being introverts. So that's what this episode is going to be about. But to not alienate the extroverts, of course, we will be doing a little bit of a short explanation of introversion and extroversion before we before we dive deep into the topic of meeting people and as an introvert. What do you think about that, Emily?
Sounds great. I'm so excited.
Me too. All right. So just so we have a good foundation, as introversion and extroversion can be defined in very different ways by different people and psychologists and psychiatrists. So we want to limit the conversation topic to the theories that we have decided to focus on for this episode. By the way, we have a disclaimer. Emily, go on.
We are not psychologists.
Nor are we psychiatrists or any of that sorts. We
cannot
did not study that.
diagnose you. We're just talking about our personal experiences, and we both really love psychology, the field of psychology. We love the brain. There's a lot of things that we just really enjoy talking about, but that is not to say that we're experts in this. We're purely coming from our personal experiences. So we just wanted to clarify that
Before we just dive into this.
before we're just like, hey, guess what this is?
Yeah, and maybe
Being
next
experts
time.
in being introverts.
And maybe next time we'd love to invite a psychologist on our episode. So maybe stay tuned for that one.
I mean, we had to find one first, but when we do,
We will get to that. We will bring on the best person to do the job, which that is not us. All right, but we do have good sources for you. So first, just to limit the topic, as I've mentioned, we want to express the theory of Carl G. Jung. So Carl G. Jung is a Swiss psychiatrist. And he has the theories by this person have been used to make the foundations, if I'm not mistaken, of the MBTI test,
which is the Myers-Briggs, which a lot of people do know about. Yeah.
Yes, it's getting very popular nowadays. Sometimes I see it on dating apps. Like I'm this. What about you? And I was like, all right, I'm into this.
And the social media descriptions, like people put, ENFJ or INFJ.
It's so funny because I don't know. I love it. But then when I see that they're, no offense to extroverts, but sometimes I get really freaked out. Like, I mean, dating is scary to begin with. But like, if I see that they're an extrovert, I'm just like, oh no.
Run.
Run for the hills. Kidding. I love you guys. I love all introverts and extroverts. I have a lot of extroverted friends. So I'm joking. But all right. So back to the topic. Jung speaks about how the words extrovert and introvert are terms that describe one's preferred focus of one's energy. And what that means is that extroverts orient their energy to the outer world, while introverts orient their energy to the inner world. And depending on this orientation, they can actually use up energy if they don't focus on the way they orient their energy, right? So for example, it says here that introverts orient their energy to their inner world. So when they start orienting their energy a little bit to the outer world, meaning speaking with other people, going out there and meeting communicating and meeting other people, it does take a lot of energy. So it's not that they're incapable of doing so or that they're shy. That's very far away from the truth. It's more about the focus of the energy. Whereas extroverts, my sister is an extrovert. They orient their energy to the outer world, meaning they like to get energy from their social experiences and just going out there. So, funny thing is, my sister tends to get really tired and beaten down and really sad if she hasn't spoken to anyone in a long time. And you can imagine how that worked out for our duo, for our dynamic. She was getting energy by talking to me, and I was just getting drained the whole time. I do love her though, but she never lets me take a break. So yeah, those are that's what we would like to define this topic as for now. Just energy focusing and where it's directed toward. Does that sound good with you, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of want to look at it from, because I'm a visual person, I guess if you want to look from a visual perspective as well, it's like, by talking to people, you fill up your tank, and spending time alone. Yeah, for an extrovert, they talk to people and they fill up the tank. When they're alone, that tank, starts to deplete. Whereas an introvert might go to a party and, they've spent a week by themselves and they go to a party and that tank drains. And then the more time they spend with themselves, that tank goes back up so that they can go out into the world again and enjoy and spend time with each other. With people, And everyone's different, and we'll kind of talk about the different types of introversion, extroversions. But I think that's kind of a concept that everyone can relate to. You go to a party and you're like, yeah, I'm so fired up, that was so good, and then like that energy from that party will like last you a whole week, and then the next weekend you're like, yeah, another party. Whereas some people will be like, oh my god, that party was insane.
I know.
I don't want to do that again for another week.
Yeah, so we'll be talking more about that one. But on what I've mentioned on Jung, I will link that in the show notes. So if you're interested in reading more about that one, feel free to take a look. Now, did you know that there are actually several types of introverts and extroverts? And Emily found us a good source. Like, where is it from, Emily? And please tell us more about it.
So I managed to find this one really quickly on medium.com, written by the Evernote crew. This one is by Emily Esposito. And it was written in 2018. And it's still pretty relevant. But they go into sort of details about... This article itself is a bit more about like accommodation and working and productivity when you're introverted or extroverted. But it had really nice definitions for different types of extroverts and introverts. So, did you know there's two types of an extrovert? So there's a agentic extrovert, and they're the go-getters. They're assertive, persistent, driven by success. They feel comfortable being in the limelight and take leadership positions when opportunities arise.
Interesting.
Then there's the affiliative extrovert. They're the social butterflies. They are friendly, warm, can easily break the ice with new people. Close relationships means a lot to them, and they tend to have a very large group of friends.
Interesting. So one is a little bit more goal-oriented. And the other one is more of a social being, a social butterfly, right?
Social butterfly. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I don't relate to either of those.
Well, I mean, I relate to some degree. And that's why later I'll be asking you where you identify your arrow location in the graph, because we are all human beings. We are not black and white, and so I'm pretty sure everyone has their arrow set in a very like a gray position in the chart for extroversion and introversion. Yeah. So how about introverts? Tell us more about the types of introverts.
So this is where it gets really interesting for me personally. There are 4 different types of introversion. So there's the social introvert, and they enjoy spending time with people, but it drains them. They have a close group of friends. They open up to very few people. So that's a social introvert, which I'm sure both of us can kind of relate to that one a little bit. Yeah. Then there's the thinking introvert, someone who's like very in their head. They may come across really aloof. They're quite introspective. Described as the daydreamer. They maybe have like a lot going on in their head, but to explain that to someone like takes up a lot of energy. So they're just a bit like, it's not worth their times. They kind of come off a little bit closed off. Then there's the anxious introvert, which is quite an interesting one. So this is the person who feels uncomfortable in large group settings and they prefer their own company. Now, the word anxious, because obviously, well, we both know a lot about mental health. It's not the same as anxiety or like social anxiety. So it's not the kind of anxiety where you dread going to see people because of that physical and emotional reaction to being in people's presence and like worrying about it. It's just the kind of thing of like, I'll go to that party. I won't really enjoy it, but like I'll go, you know, because you kind of have to. But and then the whole time you're just like, I'd rather be at home, you know. And like it's not necessarily that they don't want to or they do want to. Hang on, let me rephrase that. It's more of an anxiety issue if it's like they really want to go out and see people, but they fear it, you know.
Right,
So,
yeah,
you know, it's just kind of the anxious introvert, which is kind of like, you know, I'd rather be at home.
yeah.
And then the last one is the restrained introvert, the person that loves routine, needs to plan ahead of time. They love their own space. They go at their own pace. They're not a fan of last minute plans and changes. They just would rather stick to routine. You know, if something comes up, they're like, okay, cool, let me know like a week ahead so I can plan for that. You know, so, yeah, they're all kind of similar in a different way. And I guess the main thing is that in all of these subtypes of introvert is that they recuperate their energy by being alone or being away from the crowds or like being in their own space, in a comfortable space, you know?
Yeah. I find this very interesting, actually. Like, it helps you to understand people a little bit more, right? And I feel like being aware of this has actually helped up my relationship level. I have leveled up my relationships just by knowing this concept, because I do have extroverted friends and they have a hard time understanding sometimes my need to just recuperate. But it's gotten much better, right? Now that these concepts are a little bit more mainstream nowadays, as I've mentioned. Like even the MBTI is a dating like a dating tactic. I don't know, it's not
like
a tactic,
code.
but like
a code, right?
Yeah, it's just like, if you get this, I think we're gonna get along, kind of thing, right? So it's I think that's wonderful. I think mental health and just knowing more about our brains has benefited a lot of us in society. So I think that's great. Now, just diving in, right? So the topic is about surviving or meeting people as an introvert. So let's just go into that.
Yeah. Before we do that, of the four, which one do you see yourself as?
Right. That's hard. I think I have tendencies for two types. So I am definitely a social introvert, as you've mentioned a while ago. I think you and I relate to that.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit also on the that's difficult. I think I'm a little bit anxious sometimes as well, anxious introvert, which doesn't really show, but I wouldn't say I have chronic anxiety. Is that the proper term for it, or just anxiety?
Generalized anxiety.
Yeah, I feel anxious.
Yeah.
About, so I don't have anxiety issues, but I do feel anxious whenever I drop myself in that situation.
Yeah.
So fear does hold me back. Although I do want to go and participate, it's just sometimes it scares me. Yeah. So yeah, I have a mix of both, which is, I feel like it works against each other sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm social, but also I get very anxious.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why I want to talk more about how I deal with that later. How about you, Emily?
I think I'm the same. I was going to say I'm a mixture of all four.
Yeah, same actually. But
I would actually say that my anxious introvert is probably more so, it is a little bit of social anxiety. So like, I can definitely see the difference, because usually when I'm in a situation, I'm like, actually, this wasn't so bad. I don't know what I was freaking out about. Like, you're like, oh, it's fine. But I'm definitely the social introvert. I like to, when I'm around the right people and I really enjoy their company, like I'm very much a social butterfly. But as soon as I'm in like the company of people that maybe are like a higher hierarchy, how do you say? Like higher
Yeah,
up on the
yeah.
hierarchy, you know, you're just kind of like, oh, I feel like a little small bug.
But then okay, let us challenge that belief in a different
Yes.
episode, because I don't believe in putting people in levels in hierarchies. It's such an archaic way of
Yeah.
looking at things, actually, but we are conditioned into it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think we have so much to talk about on that one as well. So don't
Yeah.
worry, you are not a bug. No one is above you. But I think just maybe they're intimidating people, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly. Or people that
yeah.
you don't know yet, or you're still building those connections, and like
Yes, yes.
you can sort of say, okay, this person's a bit like this, so you know. And I think most people have that kind of, what do you call it when you're like a chameleon, right? You sort of change your colors to suit the situation, which is like a perfectly normal thing. Everyone does it.
For sure.
And until you've kind of found where you sit in all of that, and you're like, okay, what colors can I show and which ones can I not? You're just kind of like, you know, you're the anxious introvert for a while, or you're just the quiet one.
Yeah. And I think you've seen me and I've seen you in both situations.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to ask for your input on that, because when we first met, and even like when we were going to all these networking parties, not parties, like seminars.
Yeah.
Party
were not
for the
parties.
introvert. I know, right? I'm just like, okay, I wish they
The
were
parties
parties.
came afterwards.
Yeah, seminars. And you always seemed so comfortable. And if anything, you were the one who would be going up to people and talking to so many people at once, which because yeah, and if you recall, right, you had, I don't know if that was a phase for you, if that's actually how you are. And I'd like you to talk a little bit more about that. But, and also just give a little bit more, maybe you can give us tips and notes about that, because I still struggle with that. Like it takes me a lot of preparation. And you remember when we went together to these seminars, I would usually just try. I mean, sometimes I would shrink into my bubble, try to talk to one or two people max, unless I really have to. And whereas you were just like, you know, I think you would have talked to at least 10 people at once. This is pre-pandemic, by the way.
Yeah. We're talking like
so-
2018, 2019.
Yeah, just so everyone knows. But yeah, so let's. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit later, because I'm surprised that you said that you feel very anxious. Before we dive into that though, what do you identify as in the graph? Like, so if extroversion is at the very left side of the graph and introversion is on the right side of the graph, around which end do you think you would be in? Like,
So I think I recently did my Myers-Briggs test again, actually. So this is really good timing.
so there you go. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. I just retook it.
I'm still an introvert. That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But I sit just below. So I'm definitely on the introvert side, but I'm definitely closer to the middle. I sit in that kind of like, you know, halfway between an ambivert, which is both, and an introvert. So, but I definitely think it always skews a little bit closer towards introversion than extroversion, or like the middle, for example. Yeah, like that's never changed, and it's never going to. It's just the kind of person you are, right? You're like you can fake being an extrovert, like the fake or the introvert in disguise sort of thing. I'm very good at that, but at the same time, like being around people is so draining. Like being in the workplace is draining. Oh, being around my mother is draining. Oh my God, she just keeps talking. She's so draining, and I didn't realize it, but that's why I spent so much time in my room as a kid. Like I didn't realize it until much later on, but it's just because she just kept talking.
That's
all
so
the time.
interesting. I never really thought of it that way, because you're right. Like my family, aside from my mom, they are a bunch of extroverts. And so I never really, now that you've mentioned it, I just realized it now that maybe that's why I did stay in my room and felt very like withdrawn whenever I would hang out with my family. And probably that's why, right? Because they keep talking and talking, and they really, I mean, not that they're leeching energy out. It's just it's draining for us and it's energizing for them. So it never stops, right?
Yeah.
For them. If you are in the minority, it's gonna be flowing toward
And
that
it's the
other
sort of
end.
situation that you can't get a word in, or like they
Yeah.
just keep talking, and you're just like, I just want to go and chill out.
It's true. All right, so for me, I did take the test as well, and I'm not
good.
surprised. It's still the same, but I'm surprised to find out, and maybe the pandemic had some effect on that. But a few years ago, like maybe 4 years ago, when I met you, has it? No, sorry, not 4 years, 2 years ago. No, the pandemic has
No,
already been
it's
2 years.
It's been 3 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
3 and a bit years now.
You
How
know,
crazy is
this
that?
pandemic has been a sinkhole of time.
Time, yeah.
Yeah.
Black hole.
So when I met you that time, I think I was around like 51% introverted and 49 like extroverted. So I was like
Oh.
almost an ambivert
Yeah.
yeah, as some people would describe. But I think I've withdrawn a little bit more, or like some, or rather, I felt a little bit more comfortable in my own skin and in my own space.
Yeah.
And I think leaning into that, I have become like 60% introverted and 40% extroverted. So
Yeah.
still in the middle, but a little bit more introverted than extroverted than before.
Interesting.
Yeah, so now I really need these tips since
Okay.
you know when the economy opens up and we start to socialize a little bit more. I mean, in bigger groups as well. I think we will need these tips. So jumping into that, yeah, we've prepared a bunch,
Oh, okay.
but how about I just jump into it? So first, what I found very useful, and this was a tip that I found when I just first started networking a long time ago. My very first experiences of networking was just to have something prepared, a script, so to say, right? So
Yeah.
to speak. And what I mean by that, it's not. Don't introverts don't write in bullet point and bring that paper with you. Do not.
Oh no,
But-
don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't pull out your paper and be like, I have a list of questions. Nope. But I did, to be fair, I did have a bullet point list which I read through before going in. So I kind of semi memorized it, put it in my head, and I just brought that with me before I just dove into those situations. So first, I had my self-introduction, like how much of myself am I willing to share at the start, so that I don't do, information vomit, right? And just share my whole life story, which could happen, right? If you're really anxious.
Yeah.
So I set that, like, how much am I going to share about myself? And then after that, like, I did a little bit of research about the topic. For example, if I was going to a seminar or a networking event, then I was gonna check out like what the event was about or what the seminar was about, so that I would know what to ask certain people once I get there, right?
Or like the types of people that you might come across, for example. Like you're expecting to
Exactly.
see certain types of people at certain types of
Yeah. So, and that's been really helpful for me because I don't have to sit in the silence and feel uncomfortable, because I can just jump in and ask these questions that I've prepared. But what about you, Emily? Do you do the same thing?
So it's funny. I do the script, right? But I don't write it down. I'm not that, like, this is just our personalities to a T. I don't do that. I just go to the fly. I'm on the fly. But I'm really I'm quite in my head about a lot of things. So, for example, I wouldn't say that I like pre-prepare a conversation or like expect a conversation. I actually probably do that like post an event. Like I'll have talked to someone and I'll be like, oh damn, I really stuffed it up. I should have said this. And so going through that process of like fixing up what I should have said is kind of like rewriting a script, so that next time I meet someone I can be like, oh, actually I'll say it like this time.
That's interesting.
So it's more of a reflective process than anything, than like a pre-preparing process.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
I do definitely, especially with my when we're talking about two languages, right? Especially in
Yeah.
Japanese, I have
Yeah.
a script for my introduction in terms of like, my name is such and such, and like I'm this, and I really like this, and this is why I came to Japan. Like that was my script. I had one in Japanese.
Yeah.
And I kind of had the same thing when I met people after going to like a number of events. I had that same sort of script of like, oh, this is like where I'm from. This is why I came here. I'm really into this. And like, it just gave people enough stuff to like bounce off, and they're like, oh, I also really love anime. And it's like, oh, really? We're in Japan.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and now that you've mentioned Japan, for our first time listeners, if you didn't listen to our first episode, we actually met in Japan, in Tokyo. I'm currently living in Japan still, whereas Emily has moved back to New Zealand. But a lot of our experiences together and it was also pre-pandemic. She came home at a really good time.
Oh,
before.
I was so lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's why we mentioned Japan, just in case anyone was wondering. But yeah, interesting. So yeah, I do agree that especially with the Japanese, I think if you are speaking in a different language, it doubles the need to prepare ahead of time. I think this isn't exclusive to introverts even, like, because it's a whole new language. So sometimes you just need a crutch so you can just keep that. It can keep you standing in a lot of situations, not just seminars and stuff like that, because it does give you a very correct way of saying something and not just you blubbering around and embarrassing yourself.
My name is Emily, and
then you say
I'm from New Zealand, and
and then like you end up saying something embarrassing, like you were supposed to say I love your dress, but you end up saying I love your shit. What? Oopsie. Are we allowed to curse in this episode?
You do whatever you want.
Awesome. Not just this episode. So I curse like a sailor. Be prepared, everyone. I'm sorry if it
You're on your
insults
best
you.
behavior at the moment.
I am a lady and I'm always in my best behavior, but I curse like a sailor. Anyway, all right. So interesting. How about like so we talked a little bit about the topic, finding topics that interests us, and then throwing that into the conversation and just letting people catch ball into that. Like, can you tell me more about that one? Because I definitely rely on this. So just finding topics that interest you and the other person, right?
I latch on to anything. Like, if someone says something of vague interest to me. So, perfect example. I met this guy who was a journalist. He ended up becoming a client of mine. No, he's a really cool guy. But went to this event and like had a really good chat. And I like a lot of different topics, and I like diving into a lot of topics. So this was the height of Donald Trump's presidency, which was, oh goodness me, what a fun topic. This guy was American journalist living in Japan, and I just instantly went for him, just like, oh, you're a journalist, oh, you're American, oh. And I just went for it. I was like, you must have so much to say about, because you never know, like most people that leave America kind of have like a pretty liberal mindset. So I kind of got a vibe that he was a pretty cool guy. And I was just like, oh yeah, so that president of yours, and he's just like, oh my God.
And that's where it just blew up,
and it was
right?
enough to just have a conversation with him, and like we just talked, and like that's a really easy way to it's a little bit of especially something like politics, because it can be very
oh gosh, like
it's a little bit off limits when you meet someone for the first time, but it just happened to be that, you know, he got a vibe from me that obviously I was not interested in their previous president, should I say. And he got that vibe, and so he knew I was pretty good to talk
so
to,
I think like getting that topic from that, like I think you also need to vibe a little bit, right? Like see what the other person.
I definitely didn't just like go for the throat sort of thing of like, so you got a really shit president. It was more so like, so what do you do? Where are you from? You know, what are you doing here? And then once you've gone through those, like, you know, those typical topics that you talk with most people about, you know, like, what do you do? What's your job? What's this? What are you interested in?
Actually, on that note, like, so, because you meet all sorts of people in these situations, and I actually, so since you already broached the topic of like meeting an American, and because there are a lot of Americans I've noticed, maybe just the ones that I've met, I don't want to generalize, right? But a lot of them like to talk about politics at the get-go. And I've met one person who, okay, maybe just not everyone, because I have friends who don't want to talk about it, obviously. So, but that guy that I met was actually supportive of the Trump administration, and I have never lived in America long term. I have visited for several periods of time for about a month or two to visit family. Some of my family, they live in America. And I do visit them, but I've never lived there. So I do not claim to be an expert on American politics. And so I'm just generally open to listening, right? Because, sometimes they have their own perspectives on things.
Yeah.
And that's another avenue for you to explore as as an introvert, trying to be a little bit more extroverted, right? Just broach a topic and see where the conversation takes you. You don't even have to have an opinion on it, actually, because that's another thing people are worried about. I've come to realize nowadays, and even for myself, right, where sometimes, especially if you're coming from a culture where expressing your opinion, and I do hear this a lot from my American friends in particular. Maybe that's why the topic was broached in the first place, but you don't necessarily have to have a side or an opinion right from the get-go. You can just be like an empty bowl where you can just start filling it in with the things that you like and the things you agree with, and as you listen, right? So you can be an active listener and just react to what the other person is saying if you're more comfortable with that.
And I think that's definitely a skill as well, being able to like if you have really strong opinions about something, just being able to kind of hold back and be a little bit more polite, which some people aren't as good at, but it's sort of that politeness of like it's kind of like you really want to say something, but you know that the other person's going to react really badly to it, and some people thrive off that. But as an introvert, I hate confrontation. Like,
me
that's
too.
one thing I try and stay away from. So if someone's having this really, you can see in their tone and their body language that they've got this really strong opinion that's really opposite to yours, you've got to practice that sort of thing of, oh, that's really interesting. And you can pose questions to them to sort of get them to you just pose questions and you can just let them talk. Like if it's something that they're unapologetically about and they just want to talk, that's a skill to be able to go, that's really interesting, and pose the questions to them.
Yes.
And if you're really good at it, some people are so good that they'll pose questions that make people think.
Yeah.
And I think that's a whole nother skill in itself. But as the introvert
that
who's just trying to get
true.
through the conversation, this is not the person for me.
Yeah.
It's just kind of nodding your head, and the way that I find, if you're in a situation in an event setting and you're in a conversation, you're like, I don't like this person. The best and easiest thing you can do is finish my drink, I'm gonna go grab another one, or grab something to eat, or you're just like, I say, oh shoot, I just gotta go check my phone, and dash away, and then there's this real skill, and I'm really good at doing this, and there's a skill in going to go check your phone and then finding a conversation to go into. So, dashing from one conversation to the other and being like, oh cool, I just gotta go check my phone, or if you know someone else who's there, just go straight to them and just be like, oh, so what are you guys talking about?
That is another skill. I have read about this when I was trying to prepare for my very first few seminars and group interactions with a bunch of strangers back then, but that was one thing that I needed to just learn and you have to practice. You cannot, I think it's very difficult, especially for people pleasers. I am a people pleaser, and like Emily, I am afraid of confrontation. So it was very difficult for me at first to pull myself out of conversations that I do not want to participate anymore, and so I end up sticking with that person for more than what I had wanted to or intended to. So the tips that Emily mentioned are actually pretty good. Mention that you and don't worry, people kind of have a good understanding of these things. For example, I'm just gonna go to the bathroom, or can you hold on a second, I'm just gonna get a drink. So these are very natural human needs. So it's not as if they'd be like, don't go to the bathroom and stay and talk with me, victim. They're not gonna be they're not like that. So they're just gonna say, yeah, sure, and then that's your way to get out of that conversation.
And the easiest thing is, so I was when you're talking about my tips, one of the easiest things, this is the strangest thing for me, is the fact that you thought I was such a social person.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of
yeah.
the
Tell
way
me
I
more
was
about that.
interacting with people.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I never talk to anyone one-on-one. I always talk to people in a group. So it's kind of difficult to do this when you insert yourself in a group conversation. It's a real skill to do that as well, where you're just you just kind of you position your body and slowly without people realizing it, you've just joined the conversation. Which is really, I was really good at that.
Huh?
Or I would just you can tell because there's a group setting, right? There's 4 people in a group. If they're talking in an open group, for example, if there's a gap and you can insert yourself into that group,
Yeah.
that's that's an open conversation, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a group of friends, for example, they'll usually close the group, so people can't do that. So if it's a closed, everyone's got their backs to you, or they don't, their body language doesn't open up, and their shoulders will open, or they'll step out to let you into the conversation. Or they'll make eye contact and just be they'll raise the eyebrows, or they'll do the drink thing, and they're like, hi, how are you? It's those sort of things that you have to you just get to know. And because introversion is such a we're not very talkative people, but we use a lot of body language, right? We use body language to say that you use body language in general. If you're shy, your shoulders kind of go up, or you just have to consciously undo those things so that you seem more open to people as well. So
Yeah.
but I mean, the number one thing that I always do is grab a drink. If there's food, always go to the drink or food table, especially when it's everyone just come up and grab something to eat, or grab a drink when you're ready.
Yeah.
You have to have a conversation with whoever's serving to get your food, right? So that opens a dialogue, and then you can be like, oh, what do you guys think of the seminar? Or what's your recommendation? You just have a conversation that way. And if you're having a genuinely interesting, or you seem like you're having an interesting conversation to other people, they'll naturally sort of be like, oh, what are you guys talking about, sort of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think you put a very good point there, reading body language, because and I think I will use that in my future interactions once the pandemic eases out of our lives. But because you're absolutely right, because I would always be so frozen by fear. And that's the reason why I do one-on-one, right? Because that was my tactic, and I still use it to this day, where I find one person who's not talking to anyone, and it's more likely that they'd be open to chatting, especially if their body language is open, because they're not talking to anyone. They're probably also just as nervous as I am, so they're a very good possible person to talk to. So I do talk to them, but it is very how do you say, it can be very exhausting sometimes, because you're focusing and you only meet very few people, and if your purpose is to meet a bunch, then I think Emily's advice would work so much better. But for both situations, body language is huge. Reading them, seeing if a person is very closed off, so the groups, see if they're slightly opening their group up for you, that's a really great idea, right? They're just putting your body there and slowly creeping your way into the conversation.
And you can do the exact same thing if you're in a one-on-one conversation that you don't want to be in.
Oh my gosh,
I do the same thing. Is I won't stand directly facing the person. I'll always stand next to them. So it's two people, especially against a wall for some reason. Yeah. It'll be two people against a wall, so that there's that open space for anyone to come and join the conversation. And it also means that if you're in a conversation and you're not really enjoying, you can, hopefully someone else will join the conversation, and then you can duck out without causing alarm bells and be like, oh, this person just ditched me.
Actually, that's a very good I think I like that example, because it opened the topic of me having that experience, not in just networking or seminars, but even in bars, actually, now that I reflect on this. Because So we keep talking about networking and seminars, and sorry for that. But that's how, because that's the context of where we met, and I
Yeah.
think that's the most terrifying thing, right? I wouldn't know,
Oh,
but
yeah.
for me, I think these are people who, they come to this event for a specific purpose versus like, for example, coming to a bar just to socialize, right? I think people are more open to talking casually in that situation versus like in a networking session where you're probably bound to meet a lot of intimidating people, which is why we focused on that. But veering toward the casual situations like in a bar, right? So I do that. Like for example, even if I'm with a friend, right? I don't fully angle my body toward my friend. I angle it outward while I'm talking to her, for example. And I think that gives a lot of like opportunity for people to approach you as well if they want to.
Yeah.
And it's vice versa as well, right? You can read the body language of other people and just approach them. So maybe we can talk about that, like dating pre-pandemic
Yeah.
and hopefully post-pandemic, right? Like what to do and all these things, which is
See, that's something
yeah.
that I don't know much about. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a bar where I've expected to, like, anytime I've tried to meet people, it's always at some sort of, it's not necessarily work, but most of the stuff I went to when I was in Japan where I had to really put myself out there was something about visas or startups or, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's very daunting.
It is. It
It is very
is.
daunting, but I can imagine a bar being like 100 times more daunting in my opinion. I can't think of anything worse.
That's so funny. Like I think, and it's also probably just familiarity, right? Like I think I mentioned a while ago. I think seminars are more terrifying than bar situations, and I think maybe because I've been to so many bar situations versus the amount of seminars I've been to. So maybe that's another thing we can talk about next time, right? But just
Yeah.
that's another tip, right? Just get your feet wet and just dive in
Yeah.
and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. By the time that you notice, you would be a little bit more comfortable than you were the first time you did it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
So
it's such an interesting topic. Like, I think it is definitely one of those things that, out of necessity, I just got really good at doing it.
yeah, you had
It
a
depends
dream.
on my. Yeah, I did. I was gone for it. But there'll be times where I like really struggle with scenarios, and it completely depends on my mood too, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not in the right mood, if I'm not feeling comfortable, that pretender facade that you kind of put on as an introvert, like it's harder to put that on.
The mood. Okay, I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought this up because, and this is our last tip for this episode. Recharging before and after
yes.
is very important as an introvert when you go into these situations because you will need it. You will need it. And the energy, I actually have an energy bank, like a power bank, right? I have to use it throughout that whole event.
Yeah.
And once the charge has run out, that's how I know that it's time for me to go home, and I recharge it before going to the next one.
Yeah.
So I didn't have this boundary back then, but nowadays I'm learning to just respect my own boundaries and mental health. And so if I notice that I haven't still fully recharged my power bank of energy, my social batteries yet, then maybe I will pass on the one that I scheduled too soon ahead, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you protect your boundaries on that and to recharge and to make it like a, how do you say, like you consciously recharge before and after.
Yeah.
So
like
that
doing me things or
yeah.
Don't spend the whole day out before you go to an event, or spend the day in, pamper yourself before you go out to the event so you feel really confident, you look good, you did your hair, you did your makeup. That's what I always did. I always made sure I looked my
I
best
love that.
so that I felt like I was the like most amazing person in the room, which was never the case. But
Yes, you are.
aw, thank you. But just those small things of like looking after yourself, a bit of self-care before you go to an event just makes you feel like if you're going to go in like your day clothes or whatever, you're just never going to feel like I'm the hot shit sort of thing.
Right,
Like if
right.
you're going out to a club, you always put on your best heels and your best dress, and
That is true. That
Yeah.
is true.
do the same for an event. Like obviously tailor your clothing to your event.
Don't wear
it's the
like don't. I mean, you can if you want to, but I'm just
Hey,
saying.
you do you.
Like,
But yeah,
Yeah.
you do the same thing. You put on your nice makeup, you do nice hair, and you wear some like
Yeah.
confident, I want people to perceive me this kind of way clothing,
yeah, I agree. Whatever can boost your confidence prior
Yeah.
to the event, just do it. Do whatever it takes. Like if you think bringing your bringing a small notepad filled with your bullet points will make you feel a little bit more at ease, bring it. If you
Yep.
feel like putting makeup on would make you feel more confident, do it. Whatever it takes. And you should and the more you do it, the more you do it, the more you get used to it, and the more you'll get better at it. So
Yeah.
that's
And I
the
think
key.
The last thing I want to say on
Yeah.
this particular topic is not every event will you have really good conversations. Like there'll be the odd event that I've been to.
Yeah,
And I feel like I'm in the wrong place. I'm the wrong person to be here. Whether that's I'm the wrong person to be here mentally, or if it's just like this room is full of people that I just cannot, which doesn't happen very often. But there's the odd time that I've gone way outside my comfort zone. I'm like, I do not get along with these people. They are not my people.
Yeah.
Which I think in large enough events, you always find someone that you get on. And the other thing too is that most events you go to, you're always gonna, if it's a specific topic, for example, you're always gonna find someone who has a similar viewpoint or a similar interest as you because of the nature of the event that you're at.
Yeah.
But in saying that, there's the odd time that you're just like, I feel like a fish out of water and I feel like an idiot. You can just go home. Like, not every event has to be a success where you come out with a friend or you meet someone, So
yeah.
I've just been extremely lucky that I've found someone at each event that I've had a connection with and made a friendship with. So, but doesn't always happen. So.
Yeah. Like, but just make sure you put yourself out there, and then if you find that it's not for you, then pull yourself out. You're always free to pull yourself out.
Yeah.
And if you ever feel like you can't, just remember our tips. So let's do a quick rundown of our notes then, shall we, Emily?
Go for
So our tips today for surviving any social situation as an introvert or meeting people as an introvert would be number 1, having a pre-prepared script, or if you're like Emily, then reflecting on your previous experiences and then working on that for the next one.
Yep.
And then next, finding a topic that interests you and for the other people, for the other person.
Yeah.
Then next is asking questions so that you can give yourself leeway to recharge as you listen. And so that they can also give you opportunities, if they're kind, for you to also speak up. But you can just lean into that also if you want.
Yeah.
And then what are the other ones, Emily?
Finding ways to move out of the conversation. That is a really good one.
Yeah.
Finding ways to find a drink or go get a drink or go check your phone. Like, there's always an opportunity to bounce.
Yep.
But you can always do it politely and they'll
Yep.
never know.
Yes.
Body language is another one. Learning to read people's body language, learn to read the room,
Yes.
learn to read a group, and also your own body language. Be really conscious of like, are you slumping? Are you looking?
Yes. Very
Have you
good
crossed
point.
your arms? Are you looking standoffish? Try and make yourself feel more, look more open to other people in conversation. And lastly, always recharge your battery. Recharge your battery after the event. Make sure it's nice and fully charged before the event. That is your introvert battery. That is your energy battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just go out there and just meet people. Just try it.
Yes.
Fail and succeed.
Love it. Yes, because that's how you learn to succeed, by failing. So don't be afraid of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you never know. You could find someone like Stella, who's amazing.
Or you can find someone like Emily who's extra
Aw.
sparkly. So
Aw,
yeah, and have a friendship like ours. And you can be our like you are you if you've already stayed as long as the whole 50 minutes that we've been talking, then you are already our friend. Welcome,
Exactly.
welcome to our friendship. You are stuck here. Welcome. We will give you cookies.
Oh yes, cookies. Always cookies.
come to the dark side. We have cookies. All right, thank you so much for staying with us for the whole 15 minutes that we've been talking. That was quite an episode.
Oh my goodness, what an interesting one.
I know, quite a chunky episode. I didn't expect us to be talking for this long. I swore that we would only have like 30 minutes of this, but I hope you
No.
enjoyed the episode, everyone. Let us know your comments, suggestions, and give us a rating. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a 5-star rating. If not,
Yes,
then
please.
like give us your feedback. We are very open to improving our podcast, and all of the advice that we gave today are gonna be in the show notes, so just check those out if you ever want to apply these in your own life.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you so much, and we hope you'll have a great day.
Yeah, awesome. I'll see you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.